Hello, sir. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been awesome. Looking forward to your lecture. This is a very important topic, and pretty much I know that you did research in the work of Leon Denis, which is amazing. Hey Al, you've been quite busy in the Spiritist movement, so let me just introduce the kind of what you've been up to. So you've been an active work of the Spiritist movement, and you've been a speaker in several symposia nationally. This is great. You're also a speaker at Peace and Knowledge Spiritist Center of Orlando, and you teach Spiritism classes for Introduction to Spiritism or Spiritism 101, among other courses. This is amazing. And I understand you're an MD. So you're the director of audiology for the Villages Health System in Orlando, Florida. So thank you for taking time off your busy schedule and come talk to us about such an important topic.
Well, thank you for having me.
Excellent. So before we begin, let's say our initial prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity for us to get together again. Despite the physical distances, it is great for us to have technology that allows us to communicate and exchange ideas. But beyond all the technology and all the systems that allow us to communicate, the most important thing is for us to have our minds and our hearts open to the messages that are sent to us from the spiritual world. May we have a very peaceful moment, very harmonious moment, and a very enlightening moment in our lecture today, as we discuss the important topic of facing adversity. So be it. Al, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much. Let me make this right. Please tell me, can you see the screen now? Am I full screen?
I can see. Yeah, I can see you, and I can see your slide deck.
Perfect. And it's in presentation mode, yeah?
Yes, correct, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the technical assistance. After 18 months or so of virtual, you think I would be an expert, but I'm not. And forgive me, somehow I got ahead of myself. Well, thank you for having me. Welcome to all of those that are watching. I like to start these talks with a disclaimer. This is not my work. I'm like you. I'm an eternal spirit in a physical life right now on my journey of progress. Sometimes when I speak, or earlier as I started speaking, I almost quit because I felt like a hypocrite. I'm up at the podium, or I'm speaking, I'm advising, right? But not always living or doing all the things I'm talking about as perfectly as the books teach us. So first and foremost, this is not my work. We're going to talk about adversity from the perspective, from the teaching of Leon Denis and his book, After Death, specifically chapter 50. These topics are things that I strive for. I hope we're all striving for these. And I hope that what I share with you today from Leon Denis, helps open your heart and your mind to growth, and helps you feel less inadequate on your journey thus far. Because sometimes when we study, you just feel like, I know if you're like me, you feel like you're not doing enough. So I hope you don't let anything today bother you from a perspective of the past, and use it to help you today and tomorrow. So let's jump into this wonderful chapter from After Death. One of the first questions that Leon Denis asks, right? in chapter 50. Who's not suffered, right? I mean, who can raise their hand and say, I've not suffered, right? Think of your family, think of your community, people that you work with, anyone that you come in contact with. Can you think of anyone who's not suffered? I think in today's world with social media, I think we could see and perceive that people are not suffering at times, right? Nobody posts negative stuff typically in their life, right? And there's that that superfluous or that facade of perfection or glee or euphoria or success, right? We see a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, I don't think there's anyone that can raise their hand and say, I've never suffered or I'm not suffering. He also asks, right, is anyone immune, right? The rich, the poor. I've throughout my life, I've been poor, I've been middle class, I've been rich, I've lost everything and been poor again and become middle class, whatever. You know what I mean? You go up and down, right? In the spectrum of socioeconomic places, or you stay in one area forever, right? You're rich, you're poor, you're in the middle, you're educated, you're not educated, right? There's all types of all walks of life. Is anyone in those classes, right, in those segments, immune from suffering? I think not, right? And I think we'll learn more about this, right? Suffering, trials, tribulation, we all encounter them regardless of our situation with money or education or career, right? No one's immune. He goes on to teach us, right, and tells us that suffering is a rule of our world, right? We're all here on earth. If we're on earth, if we're in a physical body living on earth, right, we are destined to suffer and experience tribulation. Throughout history, right, in all circumstances, in every millennia and every age, right, under any climate, good economic times, poor economic times, peace, war, right, pandemic, right, under every situation throughout the history of the world, suffering has been encountered by humans. It's just the rule, it's the law, right? We are going to experience suffering. People are going to feel the pain of suffering. They're going to cry. They're going to grow. And we'll talk more as we go throughout today. I think we have 4 hours, so I'm kidding. In the short time that we have, I will share with you as much as Leon Denny shared with us. So let's continue. And this is hard. I shouldn't say it's hard. It was hard for me. He really hits home that no matter our status, no matter our position, no matter where we are in our progress, in our hierarchy of life, right? Of this eternal trip that we're on, that we all suffer alike, right? If we're on earth, right? We all suffer alike, not only physically, but in our hearts. And that suffering is a stranger to no one. We all know it. We all encounter it. As long as we're here on earth, it's just part of the playbook, part of the law. So that being said, if we all suffer alike, if we all will face suffering and encounter trials and tribulations, what's different in regard to suffering? How does it differentiate? How does it impact me versus you and others, right? And I love this, right? The way in which it impacts us, Leon Denny teaches us, is the way we face adversity. How do you face adversity? How do I face adversity? Do you greet it with open arms or a closed fist? Do you hide from it? Do you run from it? Right? What do you believe? Do you believe that when you die, that's it? It's over, right? So suffering ends. Do you believe in multiple lives, right? Do you believe that carries over? Do you believe that it stops? Do you believe in the law of progress, right? Are we destined to grow? Are we destined to progress and evolve? How about cause and effect? Do you believe that what you do today impacts tomorrow? Do you believe what you did 3 lifetimes ago impacts you today and tomorrow, right? Is your destiny determined? Do you believe that we're destined for perfection, that we will evolve into a perfect spirit over time, or not? I mean, where do you stand on this? And this is what Leon Denny teaches us, right? This is what Spiritism teaches us. Suffering is the law. It will impact all of us. And the controlling piece of this, or the differentiating piece to this, is How does it impact you? How do you accept it? How do you deal with it? What is your impression, and what do you believe, right? It makes sense to me, right? Pretty logical, like most of these topics. And here you see, I can't take credit for this slide. I was going to say I stole it from somebody, but I borrowed it with permission many years ago, and I still don't know who actually created this. So if you're watching, thank you. But this basically explains, right, our evolution. Each of us, right, each spirit created by God, simple and lacking knowledge, right? Whenever this happened for us individually, right? But all of us starting in the bottom left of this graph as a simple spirit without knowledge, progressing over time, multiple lifetimes, years and years, right, of these lives, progressing into a pure spirit. So is our destiny determined? Absolutely, right? We are destined for the evolution that you see depicted here. We will become pure spirits, each at our own time, each by our own design, with more or less suffering depending on the choices we make, right? But all of us starting starting simple and ignorant, if you will, or lacking knowledge. And if we're here on Earth, we're still in the bottom third of this graph, right? We're imperfect spirits tied more to material and ego and pride than we are to love and peace. Obviously, the pure spirit, the evolvement to pure spirit takes on those qualities of Christ, right? Being Christ-like. We have a lot of work to do, myself included, obviously. So there you see the hierarchy, or the progression, I should say, as we evolve. The way we face adversity throughout these lives impacts the pain, the time that it takes as we progress. So if we do believe these things, right, today, I'm not talking about as you evolve to second order, to first order, right? I'm talking right now, today. What do you believe, right? Do you believe in these things, right? If we do, and again, this is Leon Denis. This is not Al TURRI. I cannot tell you that all of these things are true for me. I'm a work in progress, like most of us, right? But Leon Denis teaches here in chapter 50 that if we do believe in the law of progress, in reincarnation, in a predetermined destiny, right, in cause and effect, right, then if that's the case, then we will no longer consider as suffering the loss of a loved one, right? I don't know if I can honestly tell you when I lose a loved one that I'm not going to suffer or consider it suffering. I know rationally, and I believe emotionally, that I shouldn't suffer. I know that it's part of the process, but I can't tell you for sure that I'm not going to suffer. Right? Does that mean I don't really believe? I don't think so. It means that I'm not 100% there. Right? He would also suggest, or he also tells us here, that hardships will no longer be considered suffering. You lose your job, you get sick, you're diagnosed with a disease, your best friend leaves you, right? What have you, right? Hardships, right? Your car is broken and you don't have the money to get it fixed. You can't feed your family because you lost your job, right? Hardships. If we believe all of these things and we practice these things, we won't consider that a hardship. We will consider that an opportunity, right, for growth, right? I don't know if I'm 100% there. How about you? I mean, how do you guys feel, right? Are you there? I'm not 100% there, for sure, but I'm working on it. We won't consider misery an instance for suffering. We'll welcome it with open arms. We'll embrace it because it's an opportunity to grow, as well as misfortune. And again, I can sit here and talk to you rationally after reading this chapter and creating these slides that I believe all of this, but I still think I suffer and I experience suffering at different times. I don't think that means we don't believe. I just think it means we're still in the process of embracing this 100%. So don't beat yourself up, is what I'm trying to say. He goes on to say that as we grow, as we undertake these beliefs, as we accept these truths, right, that misfortune is going to be understood as different than suffering, right? As we experience negative things that we might encounter, what we might consider as suffering, as what the world might describe or define as terrible things, right? Everything that tarnishes, for example, your reputation is tarnished. You are accused of something in your business life that people tarnish your reputation. That's okay. It's not going to be understood as suffering. It's going to be understood as an opportunity, right? Same thing for anything that diminishes us or hinders our advancement, right? These things will become an opportunity for growth, to help us develop morally, to help us develop into more Christ-like behavior, to help us become less tied to our ego, to our pride, more tied to love and compassion and peace, right? Is how he describes this. We will not suffer. We will not understand misfortune as suffering, but rather an opportunity to grow. And we'll also believe, right, and embrace the cause and effect rationale, right? That hey, today Al TURRI is faced with whatever he's faced with. I get diagnosed with a disease. I lose everything financially. I lose my job, what have you. My wife leaves me, God forbid, right? But if all these things happen, right, or any of these things happen, it's a direct result of choices that we've made previously, right? I'm creating my reality. My reality today has been created by the choices that I made yesterday, a lifetime ago, 10 lifetimes ago. Today, I'm living in this material body, attached via my paraspirit to my eternal spirit, to the real me, if you will, facing the life that I prepared before I reincarnated, right? With a plan. By the grace of God, right? We don't remember the things we did in the past, right? The things that probably would haunt us and hurt us, prevent us from starting over, perhaps getting bogged down with guilt. So luckily, we don't remember that. And we don't have the playbook necessarily, right? We know that we created a plan. We know that we have a plan to evolve and to overcome mistakes from the past, to learn, to grow, to amend, to forgive, to be forgiven. And where I am today is a direct result of not just this life, but all those choices in previous lives. And Leon Denis tells us that as misfortune is encountered by us today, tomorrow, that we're going to understand it differently if we embrace these things. Hope that makes sense. So I think it's important to define suffering or talk about a synonym, right? Suffering is also known as trials. So these trials, these tribulations, this suffering, right? Leon Denis teaches us here in chapter 50 that it prepares the soul's elevation. How do you deal with these trials? When faced with a difficult situation, are you elevating yourself? Are you responding to these trials with love and compassion and forgiveness? Or are you fostering revenge? Are you looking for retribution? Are you trying to get ahead of the person causing the problem, if you will, with pride and ego, right? He goes on to say that we who suffer, crushed by whatever adversity we're facing, will truly can or should hope and trust that we're paying off our debt. So no matter what negatives you face, do you embrace the fact that we, us, you, me, right, created this, and we're dealing with the consequences, right, of previous choices? And if we can do that, right, if we can accept that and believe that we will look at these trials in a completely different way. In other words, pain, regardless of how it comes our way, right? Physical, emotional, deep, mild, right? There's many different ways to classify pain, right? In my practice, treating hearing loss and tinnitus, right? We talk about scales, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 10 is really bad. 1 is not so bad, right? Where are you? So regardless of how you perceive this pain, how it's impacting you on these subjective scales, we identify with this. We should identify with this, that it's the remedy, right? The supreme remedy, or his words, to quote him, supreme remedy for our imperfections and disabilities of the soul. So if you're on a 10, if you're 10 on a scale of 10, we should be thankful for that, right? We should be We should be embracing that this is now a consequence of what we've done previously, and it's our opportunity to correct or remedy imperfections and disabilities of the soul. Now, I don't know about you, all right, but when I'm a 10 in pain, I'm not sure if I'm always thinking about this. I am to a degree, right? Because I know this now. I study this. I sit here and I tell you about these things. So rationally, educationally, even emotionally to some degree, I really do believe this. But when we're in the heat of the moment, right, when we're living the pain, I cannot tell you that I'm always there. Now, I'm married to a wonderful woman that probably studies a lot more than me and is further along in this process. And it's amazing to meet people throughout my work in spiritism, or throughout life, not just in a center, but running into people, interacting with people that study more, that believe more, that work harder at this, and they're a true inspiration. Many of you that I was talking to earlier are examples to me, right? It's not just stuff on the books, right? It's the people we spend time with. So my point here is wherever we are in this process, right, is where we are. I'm not going to beat myself up for not being further along, right? I'm not going to feel guilty necessarily. I'm just going to be very optimistic and tell you, hey, I believe this, and every day I'm just going to try a little bit harder to be further along, spend more time on the things that are really important as opposed to the things that are not. And we'll talk more about this as we go along. Right, because we do have 4 hours, right? Kidding. All right. So Leon Denis continues in chapter 15. He talks about the law of justice and moral balance, and that it dictates that the moral trials that impact us are the result of our previous wrongs. We're going to beat that to a dead horse today, right? That's really the underlying message here. One of the underlying messages of this chapter, right? The law of justice and moral balance dictates that the moral trials that impact us are the result of our previous wrongs. Similar to bitter medicines, he says, right, or painful surgeries on the body. Think about that, right? We our appendix is about to burst, or our gallbladder is bad, or a lung is bad, right? What have you, a kidney, right? What do? They take it out, they fix it, they give you a transplant, and you're on your way to better health. So or they give you a medicine that tastes terrible, right? So physically, we have these remedies, and what he's telling us here, right, is that adversity that we face today is the great healer. Just like medicine, modern medicine can heal us, prolong our lives, physically help us, right? Adversity for our soul, to our soul, is our great healer, and how we build our moral involvement. And I just love this this part of chapter 50. It gives me an analogy that I can understand from my daily life, helping people, right, with their hearing, with your ears, right. They have a problem, I have a solution, and their life is greatly improved, and they're thankful, right. And it totally makes sense that when I'm facing adversity from any direction, all right, from any source, if I look at that as an opportunity to grow, I feel better about it, and that I'm putting into practice daily, more and more, and I hope for you as well. All right, so he goes on, right, and tells us that adversity is absolutely necessary. There's no well, you can avoid it, right? You can run from it, but you really can't, right? It's necessary for advancement. Run all you want, but at some point it catches you, right, and you grow. He reiterates again that appreciating any type of adversity is key for us, right? Because when we appreciate it, we embrace it. When we embrace it, we run with it, and we get better at it, right? If we fight it, if we move away from it, if we ignore it, we're not moving very fast. We're not growing very fast. Ultimately, by embracing, right, adversity, he tells us it gives birth to mercy, tenderness, and affection. Not just for the people around you, but for yourself, right? I was just overcome with a very calming serenity, just telling you that and touching my heart, right? It just amazing how that knowledge, that acceptance, that feeling, that acceptance of that calmed me immensely briefly here, right? So imagine, right, taking that calmness, right, into all these other situations that we face. Being merciful to myself, being tender to myself, forgiving myself, right, for yesterday, right, and embracing the fact that today I have the opportunity to change my future, to change my direction, to change my path, to alleviate um, some of this pain and suffering by embracing the consequences of the past and making better choices today. Hope that makes sense. So there you go, a bunch of synonyms, right? Suffering, pain, trials, adversity, right? It teaches us how to think and pray. It shows us the way to wisdom and truth. Leon Denis tells us it's the greatest of all work, right, that we will encounter. And it educates us and directs us towards the future. And I think this last sentence, right? Only pain can soften our hearts and rekindle the fire in our souls. I'm not a fan of extremes, right? Only, always, never, right? That's me personally, but this makes sense to me. Only pain can soften our hearts and rekindle the fire in our souls. And I think the degree of those trials, the degree of that suffering, wakes us up faster sometimes, right? When little things come your way, I think it's easy sometimes to overlook how our ego and our pride can tie into these things, or how we can put off the examples of growth. But when those pain scales are 7, 8, 9, 10, I think that's when it really hits us hard, and we're forced to grow or learn faster. So I think for me, this is not Leon Dean. This is my opinion. For me, what I'm attempting to do, I'm really good now when I'm 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 on those pain scales, right? It doesn't catch me by surprise. It doesn't scare me. I'm really good at cluing in and making changes on the big numbers, right? It's the ones, it's the twos, it's the threes, right? Those little things, right? Where the ego sneaks in, where the pride sneaks in, where you are acting or responding more from material needs or material wants, or less from love and peace, right? When I'm faced with a really difficult situation, like with one of my kids, right, it's real easy to respond with love and peace, right? When the pain is up there, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's that again, I'm getting pretty good at. But it's those little things where somebody says something in the office, or somebody in my personal life does something that can trip my ego and cause me some pain. Those are the areas that I'm focusing on more, because I think I have a lot of work to do there. And I guess my point here is, regardless of the severity, right, or the intensity, what Leon Denis is teaching us here is that all suffering, that all pain, in its simplest form to its most extreme form, is an opportunity for growth, and that we just need to be aware and embrace it, regardless, and be on guard, if you will, to see these things for what they are, and use every opportunity to rekindle that fire in our souls, to grow and to learn and to embrace these things as opportunity for growth. Sorry, I'm beating that up, I know. But this was a very important part of the chapter for me, and I hope that it helps you as well. Now, again, most of this is from Leon Denis. This is Al Turri's opinion, or my view on life, right? I like to think of my life in terms of BS and AS, right? Before Spiritism and after Spiritism. I know some of you thought I was going to say something different, right? No, you didn't. You wouldn't do that, right? But I think of BS and AS, right? Before Spiritism, after Spiritism. I've been studying Spiritism now 17, 18 years. I've been a worker now for over a decade, probably. And I'm still, I'm on the continuum of things. I'm still struggling, right? I'm still trying to grow here. But my point is, with education, with knowledge, with experience and perspective that Spiritism has taught me, I like to look at these different situations that I've encountered over life, and I want to share an experience from my life that I think it ties into what we're learning today. So let's talk about this, right? From that perspective, fighting adversity, Leon Denny teaches us, is a duty, right? Before I had this understanding, it was very easy to run from difficult things. It was very easy to ignore, right? But now we know, right, that if we're studying this stuff, that this pain, this adversity, these trials, these tribulations, it's an absolute duty to face it, right? And here's his quote from him, right? It is cowardly to abandon oneself to laziness and constant suffering, right? I spent probably 18 months of my life on a couch, never leaving it, right? Other than to go to class. I'd order pizza at night, and I'd eat the leftovers for breakfast, and I made it to a couple classes because of a depression I was going through. And what was I doing, right? I was ignoring it. I was running from it. I was not facing it, right? And at some point, learning, right, that overcoming adversity, right, exerts and develops our intelligence and moral growth. I can tell you from that experience, right, that when I stopped ignoring it, when I stopped wallowing in pity or what have you, and I started working, that this is so true. It's not just words in a book or words on a slide, right? It's true, right? Overcoming that adversity really helped develop intelligence and moral growth. We can fight, we can run, we can rebel against the law of progress, but it's futile, right? Eventually, we are going to grow at our own pace, by our own doing, by our own choice. But it's impossible to ignore forever. And ignoring it or rebelling against it simply extends our suffering, extends or intensifies the pain. It probably makes more sense to embrace it sooner rather than later. I love this, right? He goes on to say that, resisting the law of progress or fighting against it is as futile as resisting the laws of distance and gravity. You can't, right? You cannot fight that. These are real things. So he goes on to tell us, right, that humankind is improving slowly but steadily, which makes sense, right? If we look throughout history, right, the world is less violent today. The world is less immoral today. Even though there's lots of examples of these things in today's society throughout the world. If we go back 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, I think we will all agree that it's improving slowly and steadily. And he tells us, right, one soul at a time, one tragedy at a time, right? With each life, we learn, we grow. And he reminds us that until we free ourselves from the bonds of vice, ego, and pride, this slow improvement will continue. And little by little, as we chop away the impact of these things, and our thoughts and our words and our actions are coming from a place of love, Christ-like love, right? We will continue to suffer. And that's good, right? Because when we suffer, we have the opportunity to embrace it. We have the opportunity to grow and accelerate our moral development. The more we embrace it and appreciate it and look at it as an opportunity to grow. And he asks us some questions, right? He says, at the end of this life, right, as we depart the material body, what's there to be afraid of, he asks, right? So ask yourself, right, what are you afraid of? If we were to die today, right, what are we afraid of? Did we, in our lifetime or before we passed, right, did we renounce ego, right? I cannot say I've renounced it entirely. I'm still have a pretty strong ego at times. Less today than 20 years ago. So I'm making progress. Did we renounce vice? I can honestly say I've gotten rid of most of my vice. Not completely, but I'm getting there. So I'm making progress. How about pride? Have I eliminated pride? Have I renounced pride entirely? Absolutely not. And that's okay. I'm not beating myself up for being where I am today. But I am excited for the future because little by little, I'm chipping away, right? But if I were to die today, right, I could not tell you that I've renounced it for sure. He also asks this question: did we sacrifice our own interest to the truth and duty? I'm there 85% of the time, I bet you. I got a lot of work to do. There's still some big truths or some big duties that I haven't totally embraced or accepted. So I can't say yes to that question completely. Did we strive for moral involvement? Heck yes. I can tell you for sure the answer to that question for me is yes. I am striving every day to improve, to remove the walls, to remove the barriers of my ego, my pride, and my vice. But I fail every day, right? But little by little, right? I'm improving. So I can tell you for sure, I can say yes to that. I am striving for moral involvement. And I'll get there one day, as will all of us. All right. He then asks, what is awaiting us, right, when this life is over, right? The more yes responses from this previous list, right, the more we can answer yes to these questions, right, the closer we are getting to not returning to earth. The more trials we overcome, the more clearly we will see brilliant milestones and lessening anguish, hearts filled with love and faith. So, as I shared with you, right, I can't say 100% yes to all of these, but I can tell you over the last 2 decades of my life, over the last 2 years of my life, right, I am seeing more yeses or stronger almost, right, than in the past. And I hope the same for you. Because the goal here, right, is to evolve. And the more we can say yes to those questions, the less fearful we are, right, when this life ends, what's facing us, right, the more we've said yes to those questions, the closer we are to not returning to earth and evolving. Leon Denny also tells us that the more we evolve, we're almost going to regret not having suffered enough. I don't know if I'm there yet. This was I had to stop and read this a couple of times, right? The more that we evolve, the more we almost regret not having suffered enough. It reminds me of that movie, and the name escapes me. But anyways, there's a monk self-inflicting, physical pain, a whip, and it made me think of that. Like is that suffering? I mean, no, I don't want to suffer, right? And I'm not suggesting we do that, but it made me think of a scene in this movie where this monk believed that he had to make himself suffer, right, to grow. So I'm not suggesting that we do that, but what I am suggesting is what Leon Denny is teaching us here is we're going to get to a point to where we're going to regret not having suffered enough. We're in the hospital where we've been diagnosed with a terminal disease, and we know the doctor says you've got 2 days, right? Am I going to sit there with my head on the pillow, with my family around me, talking about, man, I didn't suffer enough? I don't know. I don't think I'm there yet. But this is beautiful if you think about it, right? When we do get to this point, what does that tell us, right? It tells us that we are more tied to probably love and compassion and forgiveness as opposed to ego, pride, and material wants and needs. So this is beautiful. I just can't tell you that I'm there completely. So then he asks, how can we expedite our spiritual evolution? And I ask you this question, right? Do you have any hobbies? Not because hobbies are necessarily the goal here, but I want you to think about this for a minute, right? When he asks us the question, how can we expedite our spiritual evolution, made me think of how much time I spend with my hobbies. So I ask you again, how much time do you spend with your hobbies? I'm 54. I'll be 55 years old. One of my struggles over time has been issues with my physical health. Not so much physical health, but taking better care of myself, having less gluttony in my life, less less weight, less food, less addiction to the pleasures of life, if you will. So one of the things that I've done a lot in the last couple of years is I've devoted about an hour a day to exercise, to going to a gym, working out with other people in these hour-long classes, and really working hard, losing weight, eating healthier. I'm doing different treatments for these types of things. But if you add the time up, let's just talk about the exercise, right? It's about 1 hour a day, right? Give or take, right? What is that? What is that from a perspective of time? 1 hour a day is about 4% of my day. Now, if I'm spending 4% of my day on my physical health, nothing wrong with that. That's great, right? That's good. It's working, right? I'm healthier. I don't have some of these issues that were definitely going to kill me at a younger age. But that's not my point. 1 hour a day, 4% of my day is spent on physical health. What's my real purpose, right? What's my real goal? Let me find that slide. Look at this. This is my real life. This is my real purpose, right? To grow, to evolve, right? To go from simple and lacking knowledge to evolving morally to Christ-like perfection. I spend 4% of my day on physical exercise to prolong this life, right? To live a healthier life. How much time do I spend reading, the gospel, reading After Death from Leon Denis, praying, meditating, right? I can tell you this, it's not 1 hour a day. Yet, that's my mission, right? That's my primary objective. That's my goal, right? To grow. That's why I'm here. That's why God blessed me with this incarnation, right? That's why my mentor, my guardian angel, is there for me to provide intuition, to help me on this journey. That's why I made a plan prior to coming back to grow, right? Yet, I can spend 4% of my day on exercise and eating better and physically be healthy. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not knocking it. I'm not suggesting we don't do that. But when I think about the amount of time that I could be spending to grow morally, I spend more time physically, which means I got work to do, right? I'm suffering, and that's great. Adversity, right? I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to grow. I'm not beating myself up, but I'm here telling you that I can do better, and I want to suffer more, like Leon Denis taught us in this chapter. I'm not suffering enough, and I embrace that today with witnesses, right? And I tell you that I need to spend more time on moral advancement of my soul, or at least as much time as I spend on my physical health. So I'll leave you with this from Chico Xavier, right? We can't, right? We can't go back and make a new beginning, right? The past is the past. I'm living the consequences of that right now. But anyone, all of us, each of us, you, me, right? We can start over and make a new ending. So my challenge to you, my desire for you, my prayer for you, for me, for all of us, is that we take this view, this knowledge on adversity, and we don't feel guilty for not being where we want to be or where we've come from. We simply embrace the fact that today, by the grace of God, we are alive. We have the teachings of those that have come before us. We have the assistance of our guardian angel. We have the example of Christ, right, that walked the earth and shared with us how to live. And we have free will by the grace of God to make better choices, to grow and evolve. And I pray for each of you that we do a better job of that today and tomorrow than we did yesterday. So thank you for your time, for your attention, for the invitation, and I will turn it over to our host.
I was talking to mute. Hey, Al, thanks so very much for the explanation. Thank you for explaining that chapter from after death. I really like your analogy when you go to a doctor's office and they say, "What's your level of pain?" between 0 and 10, right? And it's kind of interesting for us to sometimes realize that, hey, maybe I'm suffering, but my level of pain is like 3 or 4, right? So maybe I should tough it up, right? And sometimes you see other brothers and sisters, they're like, you can tell, hey, these people are suffering at a level 8 or 9, and they're doing just fine. So I really like that analogy.
I'm glad.
We have several questions. Actually, we do have several questions here. So let's get started.
Absolutely.
Paula Craig, do we take our pains and problems with us when we return home to the other side and deal with them there? What do you think?
Well, I know they don't go away. Yeah. I know they stay with us. I know that the things that we haven't accomplished, or the atonement or the growth, it doesn't like we pass and then we're perfect, right? So yeah, whatever's left undone, Paula, definitely carries over, and we need to continue working on it. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, huh?
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, we have if we have issues with our family members, with friends, other spirits, I mean, it's good that we're going to have a chance to continue working on those issues. It's actually a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a question here came from TVC Internet. Is suffering the only? Okay, this is interesting, Al. Please clarify this one. Is suffering the only way we can move from one category of spirits to a higher one? So this is okay. Yeah, please explain that.
Well, I'll do my best. According to my interpretation of what I read in chapter 50 and other things I've learned in my study, suffering is key and very important. Is it the only thing? I can't say that definitively, but I got the understanding, and there was a slide there in my talk where Leon Denny actually said only suffering. And again, I'm not a big fan of only, always, never, right? I just don't believe the world necessarily works that way. But yeah, from what I read, I would say that suffering is definitely a key ingredient to growth and involvement. If you have a different perspective, I'd love to hear it.
Interesting. I mean, there's some, we need some, we always, whenever we leave our comfort zone, right, there's some discomfort, right? I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. I definitely think it's key, for sure.
Okay, question here from Paul. How do we get to the point that we can look at suffering as an opportunity? Is this an action that can be practiced?
Yeah, how do you flip that switch, right? I'm there. I got to be honest on the big stuff. I'm definitely able to tell you that the big stuff, I see those as opportunities all the time. Fortunately, I'm not facing huge stuff every day. It's the little things though, that I'm having trouble practicing every day. But I think like anything, right? Habits are formed over time. Thoughts, processes are developed over time. So to answer the question, Paul, I believe that to get to that point where we look at it as an opportunity is a mindset and a daily practice. When I start my day in the morning, one of the first things I do as I'm lifting up and my feet are about to hit the floor is I thank God for another day, and I just rattle off everything I'm grateful for. My friend Peter Roman taught me this in a talk years ago. Just wake up with gratitude. Thank you, God, for life, for the new day, for this. I don't even think about the negatives, right? Before I go to bed at night is when I think about the things I could have done better. And that's where I look at tomorrow as an opportunity to do better. So that's what works for me. Paul. I think any way that you form new habits is the way to go about it.
Interesting. Thank you, Al.
Sure.
Next question. How can we be happy knowing that there are others in the world who suffer a lot more than us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer, honestly. I know that the suffering of others hurts me. It makes me sad. I know that we all do our part to help others, I'm sure. I think it comes down to knowing that each of us are on our own journey. And wherever other people are in their journey is where they are because of choices they've made, right? Consequences of their past. Same for me, right? And isn't that the beauty of this, right? If all we had was one life, if the law of progress or if reincarnation didn't exist, I don't think we could explain at all how anything is fair. How could God give a child a disease that kills them at 2 days old, right? How could God take away things from people or cause severe pain when other people seem to have no issues at all, right? It wouldn't make any sense, right? That wouldn't be fair. But I believe reincarnation, the law of progress, cause and effect, makes all of this fair. I'm facing what I'm facing. You're facing what you're facing. And we're all on our journey. Hope that makes sense.
It made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense. We cannot understand, to your point, right? We cannot understand what kind of background. Like you made 2 points that I thought were interesting. We do our part, right? We cannot fix the world. We can do our part and understand that each one of us in a journey. And what to me appears as suffering, but maybe that spirit is much stronger than me, right?
Sure.
I can go through that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, this comes from the United States Spiritist Federation. Do you believe we will perceive suffering differently as we become more evolved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Leon Denny said it very clearly in chapter 50 towards the end. He says, look, at some point, your life's gonna end physically, and you're going to regret not suffering more. And I think as we get closer and closer to that, we are more and more evolved. So absolutely. I can only speak right personally for me. And in the last 17, 18 years, even the last 2 years, my perspective on suffering has evolved. And I believe I'm evolving more and more each day.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, it came from Tanya. This particular question. Most of us like to feel victims of the situations, as if life is not fair, as if we are being a punishment. Victims, really?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very easy to take a victim mentality, and I think we see that a lot. But obviously, I think we know, right? Life is fair, man. There's nothing unfair about this world. It's rational, it's fair, it's logical. Ultimately, we are not victims of our past, but we are recipients of our past, right? We are living today what we created yesterday, and it's up to us to change tomorrow. And the more we follow the example of Christ, the more we untie our bonds to vice, to ego, to pride, to material pleasures, or not material pleasures, but material wants and needs. I mean, does it really matter how much money I have in my bank account? It doesn't matter. Does it really matter what kind of car I drive? It doesn't matter. What matters is how I think, how I speak, and how I act. What are my real thoughts about Tanya right now? Right? Do I wish her love? Do I wish her peace? Do I want her to be happy? Is there anything in my mind that's negative towards the people that I face? Am I wishing my enemies well? Am I wishing them ill? And I think that's what it comes down to, right? I have the ability, we all have the ability to change tomorrow. We are not victims. We are the recipients of our previous choices, and we can change tomorrow. We can make a new ending, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you. From TV Say, can we evolve by loving and with that avoid suffering?
Well, I don't think we can avoid suffering. I think we can lessen suffering. As Leon Denny taught us in chapter 50, to avoid, to run, to hide, right? It's not the answer. Embrace the suffering, and over time, there'll be less suffering, right? We will not return to Earth or a world like Earth. We will reincarnate in planets and worlds based more on love than material wants and needs. So I think the answer here is we're definitely going to evolve by loving, but we're not going to evolve by avoiding suffering.
Loving helps a lot, right? I mean, it's part of, especially loving our enemies, I'll say, or an enemy is kind of a strong word, like, at least those who cause us harm. That's a big challenge, and it helps us grow a lot.
Absolutely. We had a guest speaker, and I wish I could remember her name, but the name of her talk was "Try Loving," and it was all about facing everything that comes your way with love, and so true. I mean, that's the best medicine. That's the best solution.
Keeping the positive energy, right? It's from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Sometimes we suffer from seeing our loved ones suffer. Is this also part of our spiritual evolution?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, any experience that we experience in the body, right, impacts the soul. I mean, our thoughts, our words, our actions definitely impacts the soul. So yeah, yes, the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. It's kind of hard. It's kind of painful, right, to see the loved ones suffer.
Sure.
But it's interesting that even though our loved ones, they have, like you mentioned before, they have their own journey as well.
Yes, and I mean, why are we with the people that we're with, right? I don't believe it's random. I'm here to assist those and grow at the same time with the people I put myself in this family unit with. Who knows what we were in the last life, but there's definitely some work going on here. I don't know exactly what, but I do understand that it's all part of the process.
Right. And even our loved ones, we can guide them, especially, when it comes to our children, we can guide them, teach them. But at some point, they're actually eternal, immortal souls, right? Eternal spirits, so they have their own journey as well.
Yes, and my 3 daughters are teenagers now, and I must say that they don't always believe what I say, and that's okay.
Yeah. So next question here: why there are people? Check this out, Al. Tell us about this one. So why there are people who keep making the same mistakes and suffering the consequences, but who do not seem to learn?
I think they're talking about me. I mean, listen. Why are any of us making the same mistakes? I mean, do I know people that don't seem to make the same mistakes, that seem a whole lot more perfect than me? Absolutely. But most of the people, I mean, I can only speak for me, right? I'm making less mistakes today than I used to when it comes to these moral questions, right? But man, I still make some of the same mistakes. And why don't I learn? I don't know the answer. I just know that it has to be a choice, right? We have to choose to grow or not to grow, right? And I think over time it just becomes a habit. I am making better choices today than I did a decade ago, even 2 years ago. But I'm still making some of the same mistakes with my ego and my pride and pleasing my eyes and my senses as opposed to my soul. And I can't answer to you why I can't answer why I make some of the same mistakes, except to tell you that I think it's par for the course. I think it comes with the territory. But I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for that one.
No, but you've answered the question. Much appreciated.
Sure.
I believe we have one more. Humility is so important. That's for Vio Carax. Humility is so important. I know at times that when I have felt humiliated by someone, it is anger that wants to come through. Yet I know if I observe myself with self-awareness is there progress?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Anytime somebody or something causes you humiliation or pain, I mean, what is that? That's a trauma. That's something that deflates you, that beats you down, that hurts you, right? And there was a slide in the talk, right, that these traumas, these issues will affect you less and less as you embrace them and find the growth. So in your example or in your question, Carix, when you respond to aggression or humiliation, or you're the target of someone's hate in a loving, positive way, as opposed to seeking retribution, firing back with hatred in your heart for them, wishing them death or sickness, right? Anytime you can send them love and embrace them, virtually. I don't think Christ was teaching us to hug our enemies and invite them to dinner necessarily, right? But I do think his teachings tell us and dictate that I should wish them well. I should love them and pray for them and hope that they find their way. And I think your question, your example is awesome. Yes, it's progress.
It's still progress, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Al, reminds me of the story of Nelson Mandela, who was arrested, right? And everybody, when he became president of South Africa, everybody thought that he was going to retaliate, right? Everybody thought, hey, man, he's going to get back at all those people who humiliated. But no, he decided to take, to show the other face so that's the only way for a nation, for him, for others to grow. So, yeah, that reminds me of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in South Africa 2019. We went on a humanitarian trip, and
nice.
We went to the Nelson Mandela Museum, I think is what it's called. And what an amazing story of forgiveness, of love, of thinking of the progress of a people as opposed to hanging on to the pain. Beautiful. I'll cry here. I mean, get tears in my eyes. The pain and the suffering that was inflicted on a people was just staggering. But yeah, a great example. I love that example, sir.
Excellent. I think that was the last question.
Well, I thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's been awesome. Very enlightening, a very important lecture, Al. We appreciate it. So again, we would like you, to say the final prayer. But sure. Before, just reminding, so our lectures, they continue next week. We're gonna have next week. We're gonna have Dennis Isi. He's gonna be talking to us about when it's time to change, the parable of the prodigal son. So actually, it's kind of related to your topic, right? About pain, but then about change and the prodigal son going all through all the suffering. So it's kind of like ties to your lecture as well.
Well, I can promise you that Dan's talk is going to be much better than my talk. That guy's amazing.
Well, your talk was great. So excellent. All right. All right, Al, please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just ask everyone to relax and just connect as best you can to this positive energy, to the love of our Creator, to the support of our mentors and those that have gone before us, and just really tap into that wonderful love of Christ. Let's pray that we let it shower over us and envelop us in peace and mercy, in love, and that we take this moment simply to thank God for life, to thank God for free will, and pray fervently for courage, for strength, to take the lessons of today and the lessons of those that have gone before us, that have been shared with us from beyond, to just change our free will, right? To use our free will as best as we can to share love, to forgive, and to be kind, not just to those around us and turning the other cheek, but to ourselves, and believe that we were created to evolve, that we were created for Christ-like perfection, that each of us within us has the ability to change and to grow and to create that ending that Chico shared with us, a better ending. So, Father, thank you. We love you, and we're so grateful for the teachings that were shared. Amen.